Greetings and welcome everyone to another episode of Oral Pathology 360. As you know, we are in Oral Pathology 360, we don't only talk about oral pathology or, for that matter, the broader context of diagnostics. We also talk about the topics that are often forgotten or ignored. And today we have one such topic, that is the role of management. Are they helping or are they destroying? And what can we do to help it as far as the academic institutions go? Now, with that, let me say that we also have some very important news for which you should stay on till the end. I will share it with you at the end. Our conference, the International Oral Diseases Case Presentation Conference, the conference that does not sleep for 48 hours, will be back soon, and I will give you the dates. There's also a possibility to become a guest speaker by taking part in a competition, for which also I will give you the details at the end. So stay tuned. In the meanwhile, let me welcome today's guest speaker, Professor Hans. Yes, hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm feeling very honoured, just very grateful.
It's really great to have you here. And our introductions are very short, but let me just say a few words. Now, I know Professor Hans, and I hope I'm going to get this Zoellner. Actually, how is the pronunciation?
Yeah, Zollner's pretty good. Yeah, that's about right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I forgot to ask you earlier. My bad, sorry.
No,
Okay.
no, no.
Yeah, so we have Professor Zollner with us. I have known him and been impressed by him actually from many years back at the point in time when I was trying to get a PhD in the University of Sydney. And I was really impressed with his work and the work of his team, although that didn't work out. But then I got to know one more person, and he's a great person to know. I've been following what he's been doing on LinkedIn, which is why I knew what is happening right now. He's been doing a lot of work on basically the management of universities and how best they should be handled and how they should be run. He is currently a visiting fellow at the Graduate School of Biomedical Engineering, University of North South Wales, and professor and honorary associate biomedical engineering, University of Sydney, and director and head of Strong Arc Private Limited. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. And he has been the co-founder and chairman of a think tank and advocacy group for oral health, which has been concerned by changes in universities that he believes threaten academic quality and function. So, this is exactly what he is here today for. And he has been kind enough to record his lecture. So, we will listen to that and then we will come back for a discussion.
Well, I'm Hans Zollner. I have a dental background and I've also worked as an academic, full-time academic for much of my career across numerous different institutions, but primarily at the University of Sydney. I've served widely in many different capacities, and so I've had appreciable experience in academia and in leadership and administration as it relates to academia. Now, unfortunately, in 2021, I had an unhappy separation, and we don't need to go into the details of that. That's not really so relevant. But I will say that I expressed objections to aspects of the management of the dental school at that time. And if you wish, you can read something about it if you go to the Australian Parliamentary website and look up the relevant submission to a recent inquiry into dental services. Section I.3 has got something related to that. But the most important aspect from my point of view was that my discipline of oral pathology was dissolved. So oral pathology as a discipline no longer exists in the University of Sydney, and I was driven into redundancy and early semi-retirement, and am now serving or working as a freelance academic in my capacity as what I'm thinking of now as a nomad professor, and which is why I'm speaking to you now here on the banks of the beautiful Hawkesbury River, where you'll hear the birds and hear the occasional speedboat as it heads along the river here, so apologies for the background noise. But in any case, this is where I am, and it's quite beautiful. Now, I have had cause to think quite a lot about university governance over the years, firstly as a practicing senior academic, but also as an academic who found himself very surprisingly in conflict with the administration of his university, and also more recently now in context of my service as a member of a number of associations, the University of Sydney Association of Professors, the Australian Association of University Professors, and Public Universities Australia, all of which are organisations in Australia that are committed to trying to improve universities and, at the moment, particularly governance in Australian universities. And what I will say from my discussions with colleagues across these organisations is that my experience and my observations relating to university governance are not at all unique. They're widespread across universities. Now, universities are the training grounds for society's leaders across most areas, and generally speaking, the people who come to universities are younger people at a formative stage of their life, and I would say that the examples that students are set are the examples that they follow. The values that students incorporate during their training in universities, well, these are often, I believe, the values that are then used to deliver service in their further roles throughout the rest of their life in society. Now, our times are wondrous in many regards. Wonderful advances are being made all the time, and there are wonderful opportunities opening up all the time. But I've also noticed that there seems to be a global failure to have a sharing, if you will, throughout the community of the benefits that come from these wonderful advances. And also at this time we face many existential challenges. I just list some of them there. I mean, we're just coming out of a pandemic, there'll be others. This is, no matter how you look at it, also a time of existential challenges. And while solutions do often seem to be apparent, what is remarkable to me is that our decision makers, our governments, our leaders of industry, our public servants, do not seem to be especially animated to do anything about it. They seem to be unwilling to act, despite the fact that there are often great calls from the public for something to be done. So this time of existential crises seems also to be a strange time of moral paralysis. Our decision-making structures seem to deny empirical facts. They denigrate expressions of concern. They ignore public calls for action. They seem to be highly selective in the voices that they listen to. They lack empathy for the populace, and they seem to lack responsibility for the future. So the question has to be asked, where exactly are our decision makers trained? Well, by and large, they are trained in our universities. And I would say that poor leadership in our universities extends ultimately to poor leadership that's mirrored by our graduates when they go out into the community. And this amplifies that poor leadership that these graduates are modelling themselves upon out in the wider society. So I would argue that governance in universities, if it's poor governance, well, it impacts not only the function of the universities themselves, but actually has a widespread societal impact. So what precisely are the main problems that we see in university governance? Now, I would refer you, if you want a fairly complete discussion, to this document, which is available via the Australian Universities Accord website. You can just Google it, you won't have too much trouble finding it. It's the document which is submitted to the Accord by the Australian Association of University Professors. There are other very good documents as well by PUA and but I would say that this is a reasonably concise and readable document, and I think it makes a pretty good case. So the main identified concerns, I mean, there are quite a number, but the big ones that seem biggest to me anyway, are first of all that there are too few senior academics in senior managerial roles in universities, that the management that we do have in universities is largely unaccountable, doesn't seem to have any accountability at all, and that there is also failure by management to support and enact academic values. So just fleshing that out a little bit more, with regard to there being an insufficient number of academics in senior positions, our universities are structured so that there is an overriding council or senate, which seems to be largely appointed and filled with people who have often no academic training and no academic experience at all. And similarly, the senior ranks of management, vice-chancellors, deputy vice-chancellors, etc., are often also increasingly drawn from people who are not necessarily academics, and so they simply do not know the business of universities. They don't understand the culture, they don't understand the work that has to take place in universities, they're simply uninformed. Also, with regard to unaccountable management, I mean, it seems a strange thing to say, but we've observed that, on the whole, many managers, not all, but certainly many managers, seem to have a very princely approach to their role in the university. They seem to imagine themselves somewhat aligned like a medieval prince, not necessarily having to account for what they say or do. They will make determinations, they simply expect the determinations to be followed, and there's no reason to account to the peasants. And it's a most remarkable attitude. I find it perpetually surprising, but nonetheless, university managers are now, by and large, unaccountable to the academics who they work with, to the students who they particularly work for, and to the public and government, remarkably. We see with this a complete substitution of collegial decision-making with corporate management authoritarian practice. Now, just to flesh that out, collegial academic decision-making, well, that's the way in which universities have traditionally been run. I mean, it's inherently consultative, it recognises and benefits from the discipline level and the operational expertise of the broad collegiate, of the broad staff of the university. It's based on trust. There has to be trust in the honest advice and effort of one's colleagues. And it's inherently informed by this wide collegiate. It's distributive, it's empowering, and it's encouraging. Now, the top-down managerialism that we now see primarily in universities seems to be imported from the corporate world. It's inherently authoritarian. It has low levels of trust, and because it's not engaging the knowledge and experience and the operational knowledge of the staff, it's inherently uninformed, it's centralised, it's disempowering and discouraging. Now, one aspect of top-down management that has to be stressed is that it demands unquestioning obedience. It's premised on the idea that a manager will give you an instruction and must rely upon you to simply carry out the instructions that you've been given. So the whole model is premised on obedient implementation of instructions. Now, this is in contrast to the way that academics normally work, and in fact the way that academics are trained, and that academics are in fact trained to be inherently questioning and inherently perhaps disobedient. We're trained and we feel a duty to seek the reasons and the basis for instructions. We insist on a cogent, reasoned argument that's based on empirical facts. And beyond that, academics on the whole don't feel like they're just working somewhere, they're not turning up for their job to earn some cash. They feel a sense of ownership for the work they're doing, for the students, for the school, for the discipline, and of the university. They feel it's their university, and they work to serve the mission of the university. And so they're not going to just sort of, if they're asked to do something which sounds daft, that strikes them as a daft instruction. They're not just going to easily accept it. Oh, well, I've got a daft instruction, but the boss has said, so I'll just go off and do it. Doesn't matter. It's the boss's problem. Most academics actually feel that, oh, wow, I've got a daft instruction. If I do this, it's going to cause harm. I must question this. I must challenge it. And this establishes an enormous clash of cultures, an enormous clash of values. And this brings us really to the third point, and that is failure by management to support and enact academic values. Now, you've got to see academic values in context of what they're really for. I mean, the functions of a university are to create knowledge through research, to disseminate knowledge through teaching by various means, and also to act as a reservoir, a reservoir of knowledge and a reservoir of expertise, as a source of expert, independent, trusted and informed and honest advice for anybody who might need it, for government, for the public services, obviously, for industry, for community groups, for anybody. Anybody who wishes to have honest, frank advice should be able to go to an expert in a university who will share that. And this is another important function of universities. And these three key functions of universities, well, they are delivered by putting into life, by putting into practice, a set of core academic values. Now, you can argue about which academic values should be there, but this is what we come down to as the bare minimum, the absolute minimum core list of values that must be enacted in order for the work of universities to be carried out. There must be rigour and expertise. There must be commitment to advancing, doing research and promulgating knowledge through teaching. There must be collegiality, because that's really the oil, if you will, that makes it possible for all these often pretty high, big ego people to work together and to achieve outcomes as a group and to make informed decisions. There must be freedom of speech so that you can say whatever you feel must be said without fear of repercussions. There must be robust intellectual discourse, because this is how ideas are tested and advanced and developed through argument and discussion and debate. There must be freedom of academic research, because who better to decide what burning question must be explored in any given area of endeavour than the academic who has spent their whole life trying to understand a given area or a given discipline. So obviously freedom of academic research makes sense to make the most use of your research potential in the university. And above all, there must be truth in all academic works. Now, you may be mistaken, you may be confused, you might just be wrong for a dozen different reasons, you might have a bias, but at all times one would have to say that there is no part of academic work in which the truth is not a critical thing. There is nothing in academic work which doesn't depend on examinations, teaching, research, reviewing papers, giving advice to government. Every aspect of academic work must be premised on the basis that academics are being truthful. They're saying the truth as they see it at any given point in time. Now, this sort of is all part, if you will, of this idea of academic freedom, and academic freedom is needed for these values to be properly enacted. And it's not, as many people think, somehow license for an academic to do anything they whimsically happen to wish. It's not really that at all. What it is a necessary expression of trust in the academic's expertise to, first of all, know what and how to teach, because after all, the academic has mastered a defined discipline. They've mastered an area, and it's silly for someone who has not mastered that domain to try and tell the person who has in fact mastered a set of skills, or whatever they happen to be, to try and tell them how and what they should be teaching others in order that they too may master the same skills. You don't go to a concert pianist and say, look, you're teaching people all wrong. This is, no, let me admit, I can't play the piano, but let me tell you how you should be teaching people how to play piano. I mean, they just laugh. And but nonetheless, this is what's happening in our universities. You also have to trust academics to know what the questions are that demand investigation in their discrete areas, in their discrete disciplines. That's what academic freedom is about. And you have to also trust that academics are committed to the academic mission, that they're not just slacking off, that they're really going to work. So academic freedom is about making sure that you get the most out of your academics. It's not really about giving academics an easy time. So what we find is that we have a university management that is largely dysfunctional, university management that dismisses academic freedom, that ignores academic values, that undermines academic values, and that fails to work in accordance with academic values. Well, that sort of an administration must ultimately fail to deliver the mission of the university. And this fails students and academics and the public. But there's another aspect to this too, in that top-down managerialism also tends towards psychopathy. Now, that seems a pretty strange thing to us, but what we see throughout universities at the moment is that there's widespread abuse of staff, abuse of students, and this is also together with abuse of processes. The formal processes and policies and procedures in universities are being abused in order to abuse staff and students. And our associations, USAP, PUA and AAUP, across a large number of universities in Australia, we have this near universal report of widespread fear and intimidation, establishment of a culture of fear and intimidation throughout universities. And that is shocking to me. And what's really worse in a way is that sets students ultimately a psychopathic example, and that we are now instructing students that success is to be achieved to, whenever it's convenient to you, just tell untruths, just lie. You can ignore facts, you can ignore cogent reasoned argument, you can be unempathetic, you can exercise authoritarian abuse, you can cheerfully impose fear and intimidation. All of these things will help to advance you, and in fact you should advance yourself at the cost of individuals without fear, without concern or remorse, and you in fact don't even have to worry about the institutional mission. It doesn't matter so long as you are being advanced. That is the example that is now being set to our students across Australian universities and quite probably elsewhere as well, because we hear similar grumbles from our colleagues overseas. So now, look, I mean, it's a pretty bold thing to say that administration is psychopathic. When you think of psychopaths, you're imagining an axe murderer, somebody who's completely loopy. But in fact, actually, psychopathy isn't really quite that at all. And in fact, it can be very reliably identified. It can be identified in brain scans, remarkably. It can be identified histologically. Apparently, there's a diminution in the number of von Economo neurons. And critically, these neurons are important. These are the neurons that are really responsible in large part for the capacity of humans to feel empathy for other humans. So psychopaths, that's really their key biological parameter. They have very low empathy. They cannot really empathize with others, and this dissociates them from normal human morality that keeps the rest of us, if you will, in line. And they have very discrete behaviour patterns that can be tested for in quite reliable tests, quite reliable standards tests. So they have a diminished capacity for empathy, and it's got a biological basis. Now, one of the checklists, one of the tests for psychopathy is this psychopathy checklist revised version. It's actually designed for criminals, but it applies equally well for people who are not criminals. And it gives quite a nice list, if you will. It makes it easy to quickly get a sense of what are the features of psychopaths. Well, first of all, a glib, superficial charm. Often when you first meet psychopaths, they're just lovely. They're just charming people, engaging, and you walk away thinking they're just lovely. And in fact, actually, a great historical example of this is when numerous world leaders first met Adolf Hitler. They thought, what a wonderful man, because he had this glib, superficial charm. He was also a psychopath. A sense of grandiose self-worth, pathological lying. Psychopaths really, to say they can't help themselves isn't quite right. They just see no reason not to lie. Lying and cheating is just second nature for a psychopath. There is no brakes on their capacity to lie or cheat at all. They're often cunning and manipulative. They lack remorse or guilt. They don't feel anything if they've done anybody any injury. They are emotionally shallow. They have a callous lack of empathy, which is the core factor, if you will, that drives all these other aspects of psychopathy, and they fail to accept responsibility for their own actions. Other features that you often see in psychopaths are need for stimulation, parasitic lifestyle, lack of real estate. There are all these factors that I'm not going to go into. But suffice it to say that a psychopath will do and will say anything, quite literally anything, without the slightest hesitation, without the slightest remorse, without any doubt. They will do or say anything to achieve even the slightest self-advancement. They are very unusual people. They really do not care how much injury they inflict on people or on institutions, so long as they are getting one little step ahead. They're incapable of fundamental trust. They can't trust because they know themselves that they cannot be trusted. They can't imagine anybody else is any different. They really can't imagine that other people can be trusted, and people who display trust, they interpret this apparently as evidence that those people are just fools. People who show empathy and trust and have moral controls on their behaviour, they're just idiots. They're just fools as far as a psychopath is concerned, so they're incapable of trust, and they only really ever trust people over whom they have control. If they have control over you, some significant, powerful control, well then they feel that they can trust that they can manipulate you, but they won't just trust you as an individual. Now, psychopathy is remarkably common. I apologise, there's a speedboat coming, but I think you can still hear me. Now, different studies give different numbers, but this is quite a nice meta-analysis that was recently published, I think, 2021, which shows the results for the prevalence of psychopathy in society across quite a few different studies, and they've very cunningly awarded different weights to different studies on the basis of pretty legitimate reasons, I think, and they come up with this range, this norm, and they would estimate that psychopathy is around about 4.5% of the population. That's roughly 1 in 20 people. 1 in 20 people, according to this meta-analysis involving many people who have been studied, appears to be a psychopath, and this is a biologically measurable psychopath. And what's also interesting to know is that psychopaths are particularly concentrated in corporate leadership positions, up to perhaps 4 times higher, which means that perhaps in the order of 20% of people who achieve high levels of corporate leadership, if you will, are psychopaths, are biological psychopaths. And what is known is that many of these people cause enormous harm to the institutions that they inhabit. They do cause great harm. And if you want to see a great example, read up on a great example of a corporate psychopath, go read up on a chap called Al Dunlap. He had the nickname Chainsaw Dunlap. He's a well-known corporate psychopath. You can read all about him. He's very well documented in Wikipedia and elsewhere as well. So psychopaths are concentrated in leadership positions in the corporate world, and I think it's probably very reasonable to assume that they are also going to be quite common amongst university managers. And I actually wonder, to be honest, if perhaps they're even more common, because after all, psychopaths are natural predators. These are predatory people. And where do predators go? Well, predators go where the easy prey is. Now, academics and universities, well, I think academics are probably pretty easy prey for psychopaths, because academics are enculturated in this environment of trust. But of course, psychopaths will simply abuse that, and so I think they find very fertile hunting grounds in universities. It'd be very interesting to know. I'm unaware of any studies to see if corporate psychopathy is especially prominent in universities, but it really wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, you might reasonably ask, why is this happening right now in history in our universities? I mean, universities have been around for a long time. Why would there be these changes right now? And that's a very reasonable question. And the truth is, I honestly don't know. I don't really know. What I do know is that this is not unique for universities, that these sorts of changes, these sorts of things are happening well and truly outside in universities. Universities are just a slice of society. What happens everywhere else will also be happening in universities. But what I do think there are is certainly a number of widespread social changes that perhaps might help to explain why this is happening now. One thing is that there's certainly, I believe, an increased tolerance for the untruths, for lies. People are becoming very tolerant of lies. Now, this seems a strange motive, but I'll just take you through. Back in the 1990s, I noticed that there was this sort of emergence, if you will, or maybe I was just becoming aware, I don't know, but I recall noticing that there was this growth of this idea that my inexpert opinion is just as good as your expert opinion. Now, as a young academic at the time, I remember bristling a little bit of that, but I had to admit that, look, you know what, there's something to this. The truth is that the inexpert person, the amateur, if you will, can have a blinding flash of insight, and at the same time, experts can be blinkered by their expertise. And so, fair enough, grudgingly, I accepted, and I would accept, there's some truth in this, that in fact one should always be open to the prospect that the inexpert person can just have some wonderful insight that the rest of us need to stop and listen to and think about, and so that's fine. I could accept that. But then things have evolved, and more recently things evolved to sort of the idea that my interpretation of reality is just as valid as yours. Now this idea, this really peculiar idea, has been growing. And what it does, really, for me, it's a very dangerous way to think, because what it means is that we dissociate ourselves from any tangible reality. We no longer have a need to try and adhere to verifiable empirical facts. We just basically decide which aspect of reality do we want to see. I wish to see the world as flat. Fine, now, the world's flat for me. You can say what you like, but my interpretation of everything I see is that the world's flat. To hell with you. And now that to me is an enormously dangerous way to think, but we see a lot of that, and increasingly in many different spheres at the moment. And most recently, I've seen, I think, what is truly the natural progression of this line of thought, and that is, my lies are just as valid as your truths. And that's an absolutely terrifying way to think, because now not only are we dissociated from any need for reality, we're dissociated from any need to try and express the reality that we perceive, and this is really part of this growing acceptance of lying as a normal part of life, as a normal part of public discourse. Now at the same time, the public has in many spheres started to lose trust in authorities. And there's reason for this. Authority figures have been publicly outed for lying and for misbehaviour. Politicians have been caught lying. It's now considered normal for politicians to lie. And, they're caught out and lie. Well, not to worry. Got away with those ones, didn't get away with this one. No one seems to be especially shocked when politicians are caught in outrageous lies anymore. Chief executive officers are caught lying. No one seems to be particularly concerned. There are financial scandals. Well, that's very upsetting, but not to worry. We'll all move on. Someone gets a golden handshake. And clergy is corrupt. Not a problem. Authority figures have been increasingly caught out doing in fundamental misconduct, and there's not much real consequence. And the public sees this, and many people see this and quite reasonably say to themselves, well, if the authorities can't be trusted, why trust authorities at all? And that's entirely reasonable when you think about it. The trouble is that it doesn't apply in every instance, and so we see the evolution of all sorts of strange fantasy conspiracy worlds. The MAGA people, the QAnon people, the anti-vaccination movement cost millions of lives. Millions of people died because people did not trust the authorities, because the authorities have been misbehaving. The flat earthers I've already mentioned. So this is something that's also happening as part of our cultural milieu. And then there's something else, and this again might seem a strange thing to talk about, but there's been a great expansion in business schools and management as a trained career. Now please hold. I know that you're going to find this very odd, but I'm going to go there anyway. In 1969, there was a book published, The Peter Principle. I think it somehow was a marker of its time. It said something about the time that it was written in, and it was a book written partly in jest, but also with some serious messages. Very witty, very clever, very funny, very much something everyone should read because it's a fun book to read, but it also says interesting things. And the central message of the Peter Principle is that in a hierarchy, every person tends to rise to their level of incompetence. And that's something that we would all chortle at and have a bit of a giggle, but in fact, I mean, putting it into giving an example in an academic context, the idea is that, well, you might be a perfectly fine tutor and a great lecturer and a fine associate professor, maybe even a good professor, but then if you were promoted through to become the dean, were you to rise to be dean? Well, in fact, you may find that the management skills required for this higher responsibility, well, you simply don't have them. So at that point, you've reached your level of incompetence. And the argument is that this happens to everybody in all organisations. So everybody rises to their level of incompetence, and that's why everything's not working. That's how we can explain how the world has gone horribly wrong. The solution that was intimated in Peter Principle in the book was it argued really for professional managers, that we should have a professional management group. And of course, that idea fell on very fertile ground because already management schools were already established, had been established for over 100 years already, and there was a strongly developing, a strongly growing culture of management schools and management training. And I thought it would be interesting to just look at the relative number of people who are graduating across different disciplines. So based upon the data that's publicly available from this via this website, the NCES, this is American data, but I suspect it reflects events globally. This shows the relative percentage of graduates relative in each discipline relative to 1970. So if there's a reducing relative number, so this is controlling for changes in population, changes in student number, changes in the absolute number of graduates, how are people distributing themselves now in their careers? Now, look, I should point out that this is a somewhat incomplete graph. First of all, I've excluded computer science and health sciences because they were just through the roof. There's been a massive increase, not surprisingly, in the number of people who have graduated with training in health and in computer science. So I've just excluded them. But either way, you see, many areas are sort of static, or proportionally fewer people are going into them, like education. There's a reducing number of people training in that, and in social sciences and history, etc. But we see, the highest, the single profession, if you will, that has increased the most, other than health and computer sciences, is business training. So that sort of fits into my already, I have to admit, biased idea that perhaps there's something about the growth of management schools that might be coinciding with our growth in strange psychopathic leadership. But here is where we see the biggest difference. If we look at master's degrees, we see, well, there's a terrific increase over time from 1970 through to 2022, I think was the last year, in the number of people who are graduating with master's degrees in management, and similarly with doctorates. And these are obviously going to be the bachelors or the masters of business administration, MBAs. So now, so there has been a significant increase in these business schools, in these management training and management schools. Now, I have to say that, look, I'm not arguing against business schools. I'm not saying that business schools are fundamentally evil. But what I will say is that most people when they are training, most people when they are looking for a profession, they are going to gravitate towards the things that they find inherently interesting. If you want to work in health, you're going to go to nursing or medicine or dentistry or something like that. If you're interested in the way the world works, you'll gravitate towards science. If you're interested in how things work, well, you might gravitate towards, if you're in the law, whatever. Most young people will at some stage in their lives feel called to move towards a certain area of interest for study if they're going to study into a profession. But you've got to ask yourself, what type of person precisely would be interested in learning management? Particularly management where it's understood that this is independent of the industry. It doesn't matter. Somebody who trains in management really says, well, look, I don't care if I'm working in a shoe factory or if I'm working for the government or if I'm working for a steel factory or if I'm involved with health administration or running a university or an insurance company or a finance corporation or whatever. What I want to do is I want to be a person who runs the show. I want to be the boss. I want to be in control of other people. What type of person doesn't really care about the domain of human activity they're working in so much as the position that they hold in the hierarchy? Well, I would argue that the sort of person who would be especially attracted to this will be a psychopath. I think that management schools are quite probably magnets for psychopathic people, or at least magnets for people with psychopathic tendencies. But beyond that, I think it's a bit unfair to just blame psychopaths for everything. The truth is that we're all capable of being enlisted into psychopathic thinking. We know it's possible to be trained to have very low empathy because war is possible. We have wars. Soldiers have to be trained to do the most ghastly things to each other. And that can only be possible if empathy is discreetly driven down through the training and experience that these people have. We can be brought to accept lies, and there are many examples of this, and the January 6th insurrection just springs to my mind as a recent historical example. A large number of people simply accept a lie about the outcome of an election. We can be brought to absolute social monstrosity, as has been seen in fascist regimes throughout history, and the one that often springs to mind is what happened in Germany and in Italy in the 30s and 40s of the 20th century. Communities can be brought to think in psychopathic ways, and relevant to our discussion today is that there's evidence for students themselves becoming less empathetic, remembering that empathy is the core thing that's missing in psychopaths. Here's a meta-analysis involving summarising the outcome of 72 separate studies, nearly 14,000 students studied over a period of time, demonstrating that with time, the student body itself is becoming less empathetic. And it may not be a huge effect, but I do have to wonder, is this evidence that our administrative structures in universities are sweeping students up into a psychopathic mindset? I don't really know, but what I do know is that irrespective of whatever the reasons are, we can observe empirically that whereas at one time, there once was a time when, as per the Peter Principle, good academics were promoted to their level of incompetence, and the most senior positions of universities were occupied by the most senior and experienced and able academics. Well, it may well be true that as managers they were relatively incompetent. That could be true. But what is also the case is that they at the very least did understand academia, and they will also have been committed to the university because they came from the university. They have a sense of loyalty to the institution. So that's what was happening at one time. And what we can see now instead, increasingly, is that these elevated positions are held by often at best weak academics, not always, but quite often now, and increasingly people who are not academics at all, who have got no real idea of what academic work is about, and people often who are parachuted into institutions from outside. In fact, they wander from institution to institution, occupying ever higher positions in various hierarchies, and never really have to hang around to suffer the consequence of the mischief that they have made. We also observe that many academic managers, certainly not all, but many, display psychopathic behaviour and traits. And if staff complain to the manager above their psychopathic immediate superior about the psychopathic behaviour, well, first of all, quite often they're not believed. And this is, again, very common. This is common in corporate psychopathy, where people simply don't believe it because psychopaths have a wonderful superficial charm. When you first meet them, they're lovely people. And psychopaths are very good at saying whatever has to be said to the person. Of course, they lie. Making any lie that's convenient to them, to their boss, whoever it happens to be, the Vice-Chancellor, the Dean, whoever, in order that they have a good perspective on them, and saying abominable lies about the people beneath them, so that anybody who comes with a complaint is immediately deemed to be just incredible because, well, hell, I know this guy. He's a perfectly reasonable guy. He's a very charming guy. I can't believe that they've done these things. And this person, from what I hear about them, a bit of an idiot, really. We can just dismiss these complaints. So that's very common. But perhaps also what might happen, or what I think does happen quite often, is that somebody makes a complaint and the person who the complaint is being made to doesn't understand. First of all, if they're a psychopath themselves, and we do seem to see sometimes little chains of psychopaths in hierarchies, if they're a psychopath themselves, well, they think, well, there's nothing wrong with that, that's what I would do myself. Or alternatively, if it's the person who has no real understanding of academia, as increasingly the case now, they simply don't understand the academic business and the academic values upon which the complaints are being made. So what can be done? What can be done about this? Well, our associations have come up with many different arguments, many different proposals, but there are a number of key steps that we think should be undertaken. First of all, senior management roles should be held by experienced senior academics. People who understand the mission of academia, who understand the practice of academia, and who understand the culture of academia. We also think that there should be, if you will, an administrative framework in which all policy and procedure documents in the university list those 7 core academic values, and also then further give clear instruction that whatever the policy or procedure happens to be, it must be interpreted and enacted in accordance with these values. Now, the purpose of doing this, of inserting values in policies and procedures, apart from it being sort of like a nice thing to do, it actually, I think, would be very practical because, first of all, anybody working in the university, whether they be a manager, an academic, a student, a general staff member, anybody can look at that policy and procedure and say, well, how will I interpret this? Well, I will interpret it in accordance with these values. And also, when there is transgression, when people act outside of, beyond, or exclude or fail to accord with these academic values, well, then anybody can point to the relevant policy document and say, well, hang on here, you have not been serving in accordance with these academic values, and that this is therefore a problem. At the moment, that's actually not administratively possible. So this simple little administrative tool would provide an administrative basis, if you will, for effective complaint and for correction and for holding everybody in the university, managers, academics, everybody is held to account according to these values via their expression through these policies. And I think that is a very practical and simple thing that can be done. Now, in Australia, the public universities are established via Acts of Parliament, and so to help to make sure that the first 2 recommendations are actually enacted, we've also recommended that there be emendation to the relevant acts to require recommendations 1 and 2 to be enacted, but also that there be processes established whereby there be a reporting process whereby universities and university administrators report to the relevant government authority and explain how they are in fact satisfying the demands of the Acts. Now, so we think that they are 3 things that can be done that would make a difference to university governance in Australia and probably elsewhere as well. Now, look, I'd just like to draw your attention to this 7th academic value, truth in all academic works. Now that's a particularly effective and practical academic value to point to, because it fundamentally makes lying wrong again. So it's basically, hang on, there's an insect crawling across the camera there. I'm sorry, I'll just get rid of it. You might have had a blurred image of me there for a moment or two. Not to worry. Make lying wrong again. At the moment, lying has become accepted, but lying should really be a sackable offence, especially in a university where every aspect of academic work depends upon honesty. Now, this would have the effect of expelling true psychopaths, because the truth is that true psychopaths, they really can't help themselves. They lie constantly. They lie and cheat all the time. And so by making lying wrong again and making lying a sackable offence, you would in fact ultimately weed true psychopaths out of the institution, and those people who have psychopathic tendencies, well, at the very least, they'd be on notice, and I think this would help to contain them. So summarising the actions that we've proposed is that senior academics should be in senior management roles, that there should be incorporation of academic values in administrative documents and processes, and that there should be legislative accountability. And this would restore proper academic governance and function. It would restore proper academic culture, and it would also restore an excellent example for students to model themselves against before they go out into the big wide world and serve the rest of the community. Because universities really do lead by example. The impact of these sorts of changes in governance within the universities could potentially really have a significant impact on the way that other institutions beyond the university are being run. And we should be releasing graduates who are given a sound example on probity and who promulgate the ideas of lying being unacceptable and of empathy and moral compass being an important part of decision making. And this would help to overcome, I hope, some of the moral paralysis that I mentioned before, and that does limit our capacity to respond to existential crises. Now, look, there's nothing more for me to do or say now other than to first of all recognise and thank, if you will, the staff of the University of Sydney Dental School from 1978 to 1982, who were my university educators, who set the example for me to try and follow, and that an example that I've tried to follow through my life. I also want to recognise my mentors. I've had some wonderful mentors who have been wonderful in helping to guide the development of my own thinking. I have to recognise the many wonderful colleagues and students that I've so much enjoyed working with in many different institutions, and especially also my fellow academic advocates in these organisations that I'm now serving in, who all share the ambition that I have to try and make universities better, to try and make society better in that way. So, look, finally, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. That was really a very insightful and interesting lecture. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, not at
And
all.
it's really not a topic we sort of tackle very often. Most of us go on being just academics and hoping that the rest of it works itself out. So, and of course, nothing works itself out. So we have some questions and we have some comments. I will share them so you can interact. So, Dr. Jacob, his first comment is enact academic value. I think values need to be imbibed if we agree, not enacted like a law.
Well, look, I think that's a very reasonable way to see values. And indeed, the traditional way that universities have been run is exactly in that way. I mean, we imbibe the academic values as we're training, and we express them through our work. And I never would have imagined in the not very distant past that it would ever be necessary to actually list them and to think of ways that you could try and compel their application. But unfortunately, we've come to a time now where our institutions, certainly our universities, are in control or are being controlled by people who simply don't have those values. And so I'm compelled to think of, well, what precisely are the values? And I've given a list of seven minimum, a minimum list of seven values, and said, all right, well, look, and provided some suggestion as to how that could be formalized in documents and processes so that it can be meaningfully implemented. So yes, look, I agree in principle that should be necessary, but in practice it transpires to be necessary at this point in time. I mean, if we were talking about the railway network, well, there'd be different values, wouldn't there? If you were running a railway, you'd be concerned about things like safety, punctuality, efficiency. Those sorts of values would have to guide the running of a railway. Well, I think there are certain values that are required for guiding the running of academic institutions, and sadly, whilst I agree with you that it shouldn't be necessary, it seems that it is to spell it out and to create formal structures so that it can be guaranteed to be acted upon.
Yes. So we have one more comment from Dr. Jacob. Managers presume obedience. Actually, managers entice with rewards towards obedience, tenure, promotion, etc. This calls on values that the employees adhere to and also how to collegially challenge them.
Right. Well, that's fine. I think you're describing an example of good management, which is great. I mean, I'd love managers to be great, and many managers are good managers. But what we're finding is that not all are, and the truth is that the sort of top down management structures that are being established or have been established in universities, they're pernicious. They don't seem to tend towards collegiality, as you've suggested, and encouragement. They actually seem to be really sort of highly authoritarian structures and becoming more and more authoritarian. So yes, I'm not disagreeing with you that management should be encouraging and enticing and rewarding. But what I empirically observe and what my colleagues empirically observe is that quite often it's not, and it's increasingly not. And what I've tried to do is to provide some sort of explanation for this, and then to try and outline some structure to try and deal with this to make sure that management is more effective. I mean, you're really, I think, tending to discussing really the question of leadership. There's so much talk of leadership. You can't open up LinkedIn or Facebook or go, everywhere you look, there are courses on leadership, and I'm a great leader, and there's so much waffling on about leaders. If you put on the hard glasses and look at any of these guys, there's anyone in their right mind would ever bloody follow them. I mean, if you're a leader, you're somebody who brings other people with you. People want to follow you because they can see that you have a vision, you've been able to share that idea with people, and they're caught up in this concept and they want to help. And that involves all sorts of qualities that these guys don't have. So yeah, it's so funny to hear these people waffling about leadership. You wouldn't no one they could blow a whistle and no one in their right mind would come. The only way that they don't lead, they compel. They don't have leadership qualities at all. Academics
And
actually are often very good leaders. They lead academic teams, they lead students, they lead laboratories, they lead disciplines, and they do so by example and by encouragement. I remember one of my great mentors, Professor Walker, and he was telling me about it. He said, well, look, I think about leadership. Just watch me, just follow me. And people did watch him. People did follow him because he was great.
true. Yeah, one thing, I mean, two things rather. One is that, of course, like you were saying, it's essential, I guess, today to have a set of rules for the odd few who may not be following the rules, where you have an opportunity or a measure of reprieve somewhere. uh,
mm,
that is essential. It's like, I think it's essentially the way we have laws otherwise, because the
mm,
majority of people are not lawbreakers, are not killers, are not thieves, are not doing any of those things, and are never going to do them. And yet we
yeah,
have the laws in place to prevent and to also have a reprieve if it happens. So in the same
yeah,
way, I think you have given this a lot of thought. I also want
yeah,
to put another point in there, that I think collectively assuming that all academics are good and are good leaders or are good at whatever they do is
mm.
also has its own hidden dangers in it. Right?
Well,
So,
of
but I
course. I
think,
mean, of course, you're right. I mean, it we that I mean, academics, like everybody, a mixed bunch, and I think that the normal process of advancement through collegial work, being recognised for one's abilities and contributions, and the normal process of advancement through merit-based promotion is actually reasonably good under normal circumstances at recognising good academics and those who perhaps aren't necessarily quite as strong, and allowing people to operate to the best of their ability. But in fact, actually, what we see now, one thing I didn't discuss, is that quite often we're seeing people being advanced within our universities not on basis of their academic merit or their contributions, but actually on basis of the degree of loyalty that they show to to the management. If you are loyal to the management, if you have close proximity to the management, if you are seen to be obedient to the management, well, they're all little ticks that will promote you through to the highest ranks at light speed. I mean, the most extraordinary example that comes to my mind is one young chap who joined as a PhD student as a junior lecturer and had the extraordinary benefit, the great benefit, and nothing wrong with that really, of being able to train into a PhD whilst being a lecturer. That's nice. Within 6 years, this chap's a professor, but notably close to a psychopathic dean. And it's a great example,
yes,
but only one of many of greatly accelerated promotion, not on basis of ability, but on basis of loyalty and
yes,
proximity to the, shall we call it leadership? I don't know,
yes,
to the authority.
yes. A sort of a bent way of thinking, eminence based, yes, in a
Yeah,
different
no, that's
mode.
right.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's right. But of course, it's silly to pretend that all academics are somehow saintly creatures, and all academics are necessarily excellent at what they do. Of course not. We all have strengths and weaknesses, certainly, and even outstanding academics have weaknesses. I certainly have failings. I'm not going to tell you what they are. I don't want to share them. But we all have our
we all have.
deficiencies.
Definitely, everyone does, actually. That's true. So, Dr. Jacob has one more comment. I think this was about the expert pianist. So, academic freedom is, says an expert pianist is seldom an expert teacher of piano playing. It's an interesting
Yeah, look,
observation.
That's that. Look, I think that's a fair comment. I think that's a fair comment, but I'd also say, there's truth in this. I mean, certainly, I have learnt uh, from educationalists. I have learnt how to be a better teacher from talking with people who are focused on the art and science of teaching as a standalone thing. But you see, it's a far cry from saying that, okay, look, if you're a concert pianist, let's say, and you're teaching students to play a certain way or whatever, someone comes and tells you, look, from here are some various techniques that you could apply or adapt to improve your teaching. Now that's one thing, and I think that that's a very reasonable thing. But it's quite another when somebody who doesn't know anything about pianos at all, doesn't know anything about concert pianists, the practice of being a concert pianist, will walk in and say, "Well, look, actually, everything there is wrong." And we're just going to get rid of a keyboard. We're going to get people to play on an imaginary keyboard now for 6 weeks. And that just it's a question of degree and the nature of the interference. uh, constructive collegial advice, and collegial is the key word because it recognises the expertise of the academic or the concert pianist in this case. That is constructive, that is helpful, that can improve things. But I've seen the most extraordinary extremes where people who know honestly nothing at all will come in and tell you how you should be doing, what you should be doing, defining what the content of courses should be. They've got no idea. They don't well, got no idea of not only the of discrete discipline that they're interfering with, but all the disciplines that they're interfering with, and the whole health profession, for example, that they're interfering. But they are going to tell you what to do, and they'll be very cross with you if you're not going to simply obey. I mean, how ridiculous is that? And so it's this sort of extreme entitled, ignorant interference that I object to.
True. So we have Professor Hiller with us from South Africa. And first, he says it's a very interesting angle of view on the academic incompetence. And yes, so that
Well,
level of
that's
incompetence was an interesting one. Then there is, I will also add this because it is somewhere in that only. So you can take both. Yes, and Dr. Shaju says highest level of incompetence, but don't we all start there and reach being competent and learning on job?
oh well, of course, that is. Look, I mean, obviously that's true, isn't it? I mean, we all go into our whatever position we are, and we sort of acquire increased skills in that area. But I think that that's a slight misunderstanding of what the Peter Principle is saying. In that what the Peter Principle is saying is that, okay, you acquire competence within your area, and once you've mastered, say, at a given level of work, yeah, a tradesman working in a factory, and you've mastered that area, you might be moved to being a foreman, you might be an outstanding foreman as well. It might be difficult first, and you acquire the skills. What the Peter Principle says is that eventually you reach a level of promotion where you no longer have the capacity. It's not just that you can't learn it. You can't. It's beyond your ability. You've reached your level of incompetence. You've released reached what I think he called final placement, and his model taken to the extreme is that everybody achieves final placement eventually, so that we all reach our level of incompetence. And that was the funny thing. It was like an amusing way of saying we all end up being incompetent. Now, of course, one of the things about the Peter Principle was written at a time where people went into an institution and they worked their way up through the institution. That was a time where people did actually work in organizations, sometimes for a lifetime. Now, that's not the case at all. Now, people move very, very frequently from place to place to place. So, in fact, the world that the Peter Principle was describing is sort of not really there so much anymore. The idea is still applies, but that world is gone. People don't really promote so much within organisations, within factories, within businesses, within universities. People are far more mobile now. So it was a little bit of a it's a little but yes, I think that's a slight misunderstanding of the point that was being made. I hope that's clarified it. I hope I haven't made it more difficult.
I think that's quite clear now. So we have a statement from Professor Joss. Universities are currently failing their role if you measure them against the core academic values. I think that is very definite. And we have a lot
Well, I'm
of
glad to
colleagues
see that.
actually from different places who observe the same thing if we follow the
Mm.
conversations that go on LinkedIn.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. That's why I think we need to really seriously, as a profession of academia, we don't tend to think of ourselves as academics, as academia as a profession, but it is really. And as a profession, we have a responsibility to look hard and see what's going wrong. And this is my view on what's going on, actually, and mirrored really from all my colleagues in PUA and USAP AAUP.
So we have another comment from Professor Hill. Experts should either manage in their respective fields or be cultivated for the benefit of knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more because now that's not to say that there aren't management skills that one could be taught and that one could learn and that but absolutely right. That's precisely. I couldn't agree more that experts should be managing in their respective areas and you know being cultivated for the benefit of knowledge. But I mean, we have and that's the thing, that our values and our work must serve the mission of whatever we're doing. In a university, we have an academic mission. We have certain things we should be. We have to deliver teaching. We have to deliver research. We have to deliver the role of a reservoir of expertise. And what doesn't serve that mission is not serving is useless, is no use to the institution.
Another one. So, Professor Joss is of the opinion that universities should accept that the true academic professional thrives on their platform as consultant, not as subordinate to managers.
Yeah, yeah, I agree entirely, and that's again a sort of calling for a return to collegial decision making, to collegial management, because in better run departments, they are inherently collegial. It may well be true that there's a head of discipline that there is a head of school or whatever, but if they're working well, they accepting the advice of the people around them, and they're not really expecting people to be subordinate so much as colleagues working towards a common end.
True. I think it's essential that, even sometimes we have, in fact, in my experience at least, our own colleagues, in the sense people who started from academic and have now gone on to management are
Mm,
also there. And there are also people who maybe within the management system but have an inherent ability to understand and actually have stayed in one line for long enough to be able to contribute. So I think in a
sure,
lot of ways it should be equals, where the management and the academic staff should all respect each other, and there should be what actually universities are made for, this course, where everyone can freely state whatever they're saying and whatever they
yeah.
think.
Yeah,
That's
that's right. Exactly right. Collegiality, freedom of speech, a robust intellectual debate. These all of these things, I think are inherent to normal academic structure. And yeah, absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. But that's unfortunately what we're not seeing now. And I don't think it's because I don't think it's that I've just turned into a grumpy old man who thinks everything was better then. Obviously, that's not the case. But I think it's just an empirically observable fact that universities have been undergoing this progressive transformation, and I think it's also undeniable that that we are serving less well all the time because of this. Something's got to change. We've got to, and we just can't go on like, oh, we can. And then we see, I mean, it's possible that universities might make themselves redundant. If universities fail enough, at some stage, students will say, well, why would I go there? Why would I go to a university at all? There'll be this micro credentialing movement that I'm now becoming part of with my strong arch courses. I mean, this is not something that it's not my preferred educational model. I think it's a weaker way to train people. I think it lacks so much richness that we could be losing so much. But it could well be that universities, unless they smarten up and become places that really provide this deep cultural experience and training for students, if they don't return to that, Well, people will quite simply say, and governments will say, funding bodies will say, well, why give them money? We can have a government department that gives you a list. You want to be an engineer? I'll give you a list of courses from accredited providers. You have to get so many credit points from there. You can. There are some practical courses. Well, we have providers for those too in various places you can go to. You come back to us with a list of and demonstrate to us that you've completed the minimum number of the necessary number of credit points from all these accredited courses, got nothing to do with each other, and then we'll call you an engineer. I mean, there's no reason why that couldn't happen. But I don't think that would be strengthening the profession of engineering. I think it would weaken it, and I think it would weaken everyone. But that's an entirely possible future unless universities find their soul again.
Yes, and as if to emphasize that, there's this also this comment from Professor Hill, which is very correct. If ultimately the academic professionals will survive, and it is true, we will find a way. We go out, we have an expertise, we will find a
Mm.
way. But the question is, will our universities survive? Which is exactly what you were saying, and that would be a loss. Which is, I guess, what we are fighting for is not to lose the universities. That is
Yeah,
true.
yeah, that's
Yes.
exactly right. It's nice to see somebody else who has the same or a similar viewpoint. Yeah, no,
Yes.
I think that's entirely on the cards. I don't want that to happen, you know.
No. True. We don't want that to happen. Yes. I think they have survived many thousands of years, and it would be a pity if in this generation they were lost, or even in the
Yeah,
immediate next or the one after that. Yes.
yeah,
It's up to
that's
us,
right.
definitely.
And what a damning indictment that would be on our generation of academics if we allowed that to happen. If we allowed that to happen at all, and
Yes.
especially if we allowed it to happen without a good solid fight.
Totally. Yes. And then for the last comment, I will show what Dr. Jacob has said very rightly, that the discourse, discussion, and disagreements, they are missing in every forum, but yes, we need to keep them going. And LinkedIn, I'm linked to our most congratulatory messages. Actually, I have to say, Dr. Jacob, it also depends on who are the people you follow and who are the people who you are in connection with. If you are
Mm.
looking for conversations like this, then you have to look for people who are in those conversations. And yes, you can hear it. You can hear the conversations, you can hear the disagreements, you can hear the discussion, and at times, even I would say disputes quite strongly. But that's
Yeah,
all a part of it. Yes.
yeah, no, no, that's right. That's right, and it's entirely possible to have very strongly divergent views with one's colleagues, and not have any acrimony or any and a discussion or a debate might well be heated, but it doesn't have to be a personally heated affair. It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. And it's funny. I recall once one of my junior colleagues. We were attending a meeting. I was already a professor at that stage, and she was a junior lecturer. And we were at this meeting. I can't remember. I think it was a progression meeting or something to do with examinations policy. One of these interminable meetings where nonetheless important things were being discussed. We had a difference of opinion. I had an opinion. She had a very different opinion. And some years later, we became quite good friends. A few years later on, because we were working together on a number of different things. And she is a good friend and colleague. I'm glad to say. But what was really surprising to me was that when she told me that, oh, you didn't seem to hold it against me, even though I really strove much disagree. I was really fighting you at this meeting, and I was struggling to remember what she was talking about. And I said, oh, she's talking about this thing, and that was the thing that 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 she hadn't yet been enculturated to the idea that you can have a terrifically divergent view and you can have feel very strongly about it and express it in the strongest possible terms, but that's no reason to have any acrimony. or any less any lesser opinion of one's colleague under any circumstance. That it is possible in a proper academic environment. It's entirely possible and proper to have these strongly opposing arguments discussed and debated, and everybody, shakes hands at the end of it and goes away, and we continue our work without the slightest concern about that. And we have another discussion the next day. We might agree, we might disagree. Now that is a proper academic culture, but that's one of the things that's being eroded now. One of the things that's being eroded now. And so anyway, look, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to to express my thoughts, and very grateful to be able to participate in this very interesting forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so rare. This is, I guess, not something many of us take the time to think about that deeply. So this was very good to be able to benefit from the hours clearly, and I think almost maybe much more than hours, days, or maybe months and years that you have spent thinking about this and working out to so many aspects of it. So this was really very interesting for us. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all this hard and knowledge as a very typical of a very true academic. And yes, and we have this little certificate that will be a little keepsake for
Oh,
you.
well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful, and
You're most
I, and
welcome.
I look forward to attending more of the courses. I must say, the Oral Pathology 360 uh, uh, platform that you've created is a great resource for learning about oral pathology, and I'm grateful that you've done it, and I'll certainly be availing myself of the advantage of participating in future. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. And yes, I will send you your certificate, the PDF, in a couple of days. So now I will
Fabulous.
just take your leave to be able to share some upcoming programs and definitely look forward to seeing you. Of course, you are here, you will be able to watch the rest too. And
Thank you.
yes, so everybody, here is what is next week. We have a rare topic, something that we in dentistry and for that matter, even in medicine, nobody really pays attention to, and that's physiotherapy and what it can do. In this case, it's in oral cancer recovery. We have Dr. Rushil. He's a physiotherapist with a cancer center, and yes, this will be very, very interesting. It's on our usual time, Tuesday. And also, I will be announcing a new event. Journal Club with Otters is going to be our new event once a month, starting from Saturday, January 27th. And the host for that is not me. So, in case you're tired of me, you can always have a different host for a change. Henceforth, Dr. Puyan Amini Shakib will be the host for that event and he will be organizing it. Please join us for this. It's already put up on YouTube, so put a reminder. And very important thing about this is the after the first couple of journal clubs we are going to open it so that anyone, any of the residents or young colleagues who are interested can be the ones presenting the paper. So how this works is that we have our residents, young colleagues who will present the paper, then they will discuss it with the author who will be there or with one of the authors who will be there, and also a general discussion with the audience. So definitely mark it and attend it. It should be very, very interesting. And another thing, for those who remember, our open mic is back. Only this time with a little bit of a twist. So we are going to have two live events. We are going to choose two winners from the two respective competitions, and these two will be our guests, be honored guest speakers for the upcoming international conference. So, and of course, I forgot to mention, for the registration, if you are a member of our YouTube community, you will get a discount. So please check it up. And if you haven't joined us here yet, you can join by clicking that button which is underneath there. And last week we had Dr. Supriya who has joined us. Thank you so much. So make it a point to check it out. There are a lot of things, lot of benefits, not just a discount, but a lot of benefits. And also additionally, you will be able to help us in the activities that we have including creating a video atlas, a clinico-pathological video atlas, which is going to be on YouTube. So, and now the conference. Yes, the International Oral Diseases Case Presentation Conference is back. Excuse me while I. Right. Okay. Sorry for that. So, if you remember, we had the last one in 22, and that was a great success. We had people from all around the world. And so there are guest speakers, there are case presentations, there are discussions, and it's an amazing event. Also amazing because it will be live for 48 hours at a stretch. So that ensures that people from anywhere in the world can present live, can also attend some portions of it live. And it's a truly international, truly global. And we have experts from everywhere, and we will have you with us. So keep a watch. The date is fixed. The rest of the details will be up soon too. And with that, we have come to the end for today. Thank you all so much for being there. Thank you, Professor Hans, again. It's been great having you, and we do hope we will meet again soon. See you all next week.